I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party. It's now under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms enshrined in our Constitution, and who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality.
Well, I guess the way I look at it is that the community that faced the most restrictions on their freedoms in the last year were those who made a choice not to be vaccinated. I don't think I've ever experienced a situation in my lifetime where a person was fired from their job, or not allowed to watch their kids play hockey, or not allowed to go visit a loved one in long-term care or hospital, or not allowed to go get on a plane.
Frontline with Joe and Joe Pasillo and Joe Rossinello. We are going into the breach, brothers and sisters, on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing.
Once again, let us go into the breach.
Yeah, Joe, this is going to be a good conversation. I'm going to talk about a couple of different things. Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the front line with Joe and Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Rossinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Remember, the chat room's always open at crusadechannel.com/chat. We got a great conversation for you tonight, okay? Couple things going on. We're hoping to have Austin Ruse on. We'll see if we're able to make a connection there. And as soon as he clocks in, we'll have him in, because we want to talk about abortion. Because Austin Ruse, for many of you who know Joe and I, we've had him on the show before, or you know Austin, okay? He's working in the belly of the beast. He's working at the United Nations, okay? And he's really got his finger on the pulse of abortion on a more global level. And with the election of Giorgia Meloni in Italy recently, we want to talk to him a little bit about that and what the international reaction is, okay? So we're hoping to have him on. But in the meantime, we are also going to talk about Canada. We have a lot of people who watch us up in Canada, our good friends, okay? And Joe, not for nothing, we say it all the time. I have family in Canada. John, our producer, is in Canada. We love the Canadians, okay? But there's something wrong with the water up there, brother. There is definitely something wrong with the water. Case in point, Justin Trudeau. So we're going to have on Bartholomew Crenshaw from the Saving Canada podcast. He's going to click in a little bit, and we're going to talk about Danielle Smith. Now, let's preface this, Joe. You and I, in the last couple of years, we haven't gotten involved too much with the pros and cons of the jab, okay? But one thing I will tell you is this: the people that don't want to get it are treated pretty poorly, and Canada in particular. And Bartholomew is going to come on, and he's going to talk to us about what's going on up there. And then, you want to know, Joe, once in a while, it's a good sign. People come to their senses, at least to a degree, okay? And a conversation that we haven't covered at the front line with Joe and Joe is Tulsi Gabbard, okay? Now, people are saying, well, she became Republican. No, she didn't. From what I see, unless I missed something in the news, she has simply left the Democrat Party, which any sane person, which I consider her to be sane, even though I probably disagree with her on 8 out of 10 things. Any sane person has to say, this party is a party of lunatics and psychotics. Case in point, Senator Elizabeth Warren. And I don't want to be part of them anymore. And by the way, Joe, it's a conversation that we're going to get into. And it mostly with her has to do with war. And I find that interesting, and we'll hash that out. Okay,
dude, what's up with the Addams Family white slash in her hair, though, dude?
I know. Well, she's got that Paulie Walnuts thing. Remember from the Sopranos?
I mean, what's up with that?
He had the white, the grays.
I'm trying to figure that one out.
His hair was dark. She's got the same thing going on. I don't know if it's a genetic thing. I don't know if it's something you asked the hairdresser to do. I have
no. I think maybe she thinks you did it, or is it natural? Do you think it's natural?
I don't know, but here I know one thing. You're asking the wrong guy.
No, I get it. It's just kind of odd. That I just wanted to throw that out there.
Listen, Joe. Listen, I got no hair, and you cut your own hair. All right. So, we're the least qualified people to comment on that. So let's get the conversation started. Let's bring in Bartholomew Crenshaw. Okay. And Bartholomew has, as I said, the Saving Canada podcast. Because Bartholomew, thank you, by the way, for coming on the front line with Joe and having a conversation with us. We really appreciate it, brother.
Oh, no problem. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. And we try to keep abreast of what's going on in Canada because obviously, you guys are our neighbors, but a lot of what happens in Canada trickles down here and vice versa. So give our listeners here at the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, a little backdrop. I'm both Saving Canada podcast and what's going on with Danielle Smith, because she's saying that those who don't want to get vaccinated are the most persecuted group of people in the last several years. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's pretty hard to disagree with. As far as what she said in her speech, she qualified it that it was in her lifetime. She's never seen anything more than that. So I think you guys already know that she's issued an apology, right? But she got roasted. She got roasted by conservatives up here for that. And she's gotten roasted for a couple of things that she's learning. She's been out of politics a couple of years, and the freedom movement here is it's tough guys. It's truckers and farmers and everything. So these conservatives aren't going to get away with anything.
Well, Joe, let me hand it over to you.
Well, ultimately, I mean, I did a little reading on it. I mean, I think like I could just speak for the U.S. They've kind of backed off a little bit on the vaccination as well as the testing, because basically, the Omicron variant really didn't do that much damage, to be truthful with you. And basically, they're not pushing as hard. And I mean, I live near New York City, which is like the belly of the beast. I mean, in plain English. And what I don't understand is a lot of the mandates in Canada kind of came down during the height of 2020. Things have settled down a little bit. Why aren't they settling down? Because I could just say this, I'm just speaking for the US and speaking for New York City. They have backed off to a degree. They really have.
Well, why aren't who settling down?
Like the Canadians, like I just don't, is it still that bad? With regard to COVID and people dying left and right? Because to be truthful with you, I mean, you barely even see masks anymore in this area. You just don't. Never mind people getting persecuted for not getting vaccination.
No, actually, I mean, Trudeau's been faking all of his support up here. He's actually polled at the most hated prime minister in history. Nobody is getting any of the vaccines anymore. So yeah, the vaccine narrative and the COVID narrative are all falling apart.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. And I still can't believe they're still pushing the issue. I mean, not for nothing. I think she has a point. You know what I'm saying? It is becoming almost a human rights violation. You're becoming a pariah in society.
Yeah.
And frankly, again, looking at just statistics, it seems to me that, the numbers have dropped. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And Danielle Smith is coming in ahead of the game. She's proven that she's been on the side of freedom since before there was a side to be on, if you know what I mean. She was out of politics, and she was calling out the government when there was nothing to run for. Jason Kenney in Alberta was supposed to be the guy, and there was no plan to get him out. And Danielle Smith, pre-Freedom Convoy, was still saying all the things that she's saying now. And so then the Freedom Convoy, what happened was they woke up the world, and I think that's fairly unquestionable. But then they actually moved over to Alberta, and they crushed Kenney and got him out, despite what I think was some heavy election shenanigans, even trying to keep him in. And then Danielle Smith was the completion of the freedom movement taking over Alberta. That's what I've seen. And she has a history that I watched your last episode. There's a lot more to Danielle Smith than you guys probably know about. Well, than you definitely know about. She has a history of backing up her words in some tight situations. She's one of the most battle-hardened politicians in Alberta.
Well, Bartholomew Crenshaw with Saving Canada podcast, who's joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe. What's wrong with I mean, we could go on and on about America, and Joe and I do that all the time about the conservative movement down here, okay, and how we have to be careful. What's wrong with these conservatives? Our friend Jonathan Ross, our producer Jonathan Ross, and many other people from Canada we speak to say conservatives had a shot over the last 10, 15 years, and they didn't do anything. They didn't do anything to stop this juggernaut, this woke juggernaut, and all of this hard left ideology. The conservatives are basically letting it happen. And to a large degree, they do in America too. What's wrong with the conservatives in Canada? Why are they not, let's say, we don't agree with Danielle Smith on everything, but she does seem to have some stones. But conservatives don't seem to have any stones outside of her. I mean, unless you could enlighten us a little bit on that.
Yeah, well, I think you got to split that into two different things. What was wrong with conservatives is that Stephen Harper, who had been hailed as kind of the conservative hero in Canada, was no better than George W. All right. So, I mean, he's a globalist, and he set up Trudeau for what Trudeau's doing today. So that was the Conservative Party of the country. And so, yeah, Harper's a globalist. That was the problem. So what's wrong with conservatives today is just that, I mean, you guys think of Canadians as like Northern Americans, which is the actual political climate is incredibly different up here. And conservatism up here is there's no such thing really as any choice for a, say, anti-abortion or pro-life conservative candidate. They don't exist. And when I was watching your last episode, that was one of the things you were saying is, I mean, Danielle Smith is avowed, like she said, she's pro-choice. And so you would go for a third-party candidate. I mean, there's the 7 candidates that were running to take over the Alberta Party. Zero had an anti-abortion stance. And it doesn't exist in Canada. It wouldn't get voted in.
Listen, Bartholomew Crenshaw, let me tell you, down here, Joe and I are of the opinion that conservatives are going to cave at some point with Roe versus Wade being overturned. Conservatives are going to cave in every state to one degree or another. Abortion will be legal. So we don't have any hope for conservatives in America either. But I was curious, because you do have a conservative party, but a conservative party in Canada and a conservative party in America don't seem to want to conserve too much, unless I'm just too dense, as they say in Italian. I'm a little bit too gabadost. Okay, I'm a little bit too hard-headed, but maybe I just don't get it. But I don't see what they're trying to conserve or preserve.
Yeah, no, you're right in that. So the way Canadian politics is working is that there's kind of this agreement to make policies where both sides can get along and live, and that means that the conservatives are all. If you take a look at political conservatives, probably the most popular opinion would be make a limit of 3 months or something for abortion, so that you don't have the other side have to make war against you just to get that much, right? That's kind of where Canadian politicians come from, and people who are morally anti-abortion in Canada. That's really a position of people who've thought down and sat of the morality of human life, and that's like a high education concept for most people, right? Not your average person.
Yeah, tell me about it. Bart Crenshaw, where could our audience members at the on the Crusade channel, where could they find you? There's a Saving Canada podcast. What else you got going on?
It's just the Saving Canada podcast. You can find us on Rumble, BitChute, and Podbean, and we'll keep you up to date on everything that's going on in Alberta. But also our library of videos has taken us from January 1st, basically Canada's worst time in history, all the way. We map out everything that happened politically to get us where we are today, which is a massive freedom movement taking over Alberta, and Canadians are not going to let their politicians get away with anything, including Poilievre. He's getting roasted pretty bad for his war stance. So,
all right. Well, Bart Crenshaw, thank you so much for coming on the show, and we hope to have you back soon, brother.
Yeah, you're always welcome, brother.
Always welcome on
the
show.
I'd love to come back. Okay, later, guys.
All right, later, brother. So, obviously, Joe, we have to keep abreast of what's going on north of the border, and of course, globally. I mean, that's what this is all about, global elitism and everything else. Okay. We need to know what's going on at the UN. So we want to welcome back to the program, friend of the show, Austin Ruse. It's been way too long since he's been on the show, because he's going to talk to us about just that, about CFAM and everything that's going on over at the UN. So if we could bring Austin Ruse in, Jonathan, that'd be great. There he is.
Austin, the man, the myth, baby.
How you doing,
Hello,
Austin?
gentlemen. How
Everything
are you?
good?
You look good. What's rocking in Virginia?
Well, I don't really know anything about Virginia.
That's not a bad thing.
I
Okay.
can talk about the UN, but
Well,
we've got this state legislator who wants to jail parents who object to
Yes, you do. We were going to talk about that. That's insane.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
Guzman, I think her name is.
that's right. Yeah.
Well, son, let's just, for those of Austin who are not familiar, let me just give a brief bio. Austin Ruse has spent 24 years as a writer and Christian leader. He's gotten awards from a wide variety of Catholic organizations for his work fighting the culture of death. He's provided commentary for media outlets like EWTN, American Family Radio, and is a 3-time author. He is also the co-founder of the National Catholic Prayer Breakfast and is the longtime president of the UN-accredited Center for Family and Human Rights, CFAM, headquartered in Washington, D.C. So welcome back, Austin. Thanks for coming on the show.
I'm delighted to be with you. Just so you folks know, I guess our headquarters is here in the Washington D.C. area, but our main work has, for the last 25 years, been in New York City at the United Nations, where my guys are participating in UN negotiations pretty much every working day since the summer of 1997.
How did you get your foot in the door there? Honestly, I like, because I can't imagine they just like let you in. You know what I mean? Like, honestly, how'd you do it?
Well, non-governmental organizations have been a part of the UN negotiations since the negotiation that brought about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. There's always been a place for NGOs at the UN from the very beginning of the United Nations. Now, how did we get involved, or pro-life groups get involved? In 1994, JP2 gave a series of Wednesday audiences calling for people of faith to go to Cairo, Egypt, to assist in the negotiations of a UN document that became the Cairo Program for Action. 400 or 500 people answered that call, regular folks like you and me, students, doctors, lawyers, housewives. And they went to Cairo not knowing a thing about UN negotiations, never having met a UN diplomat, never having seen a UN document. And they worked closely with the Holy See and other governments, and had a pretty big effect on the outcome document. A year later, everybody went to the Beijing Women's Conference. And then shortly thereafter, it became clear, mostly from the Holy See, that there needed to be an office of folks working full-time on this issue in New York. And so you were just talking about Canada. A woman from Canada named Teresa Bell, who is the executive director of Human Life International Canada, raised the money and sent a young lady named Kristen McEachern to New York City to find people who might, man this office. And I happened to meet her before CFAM was opened. I met her that summer, and I was one of the first 3 CFAM employees. So we flew under the accreditation of other organizations there in the early days, and because it was a tricky business getting official accreditation from the United Nations, because the radical, the sexual revolutionaries did not want us there. And when CFAM eventually applied for accreditation, we were blocked for not long, but we were blocked by Israel and Turkey over the life issues. We love Israel, but Israel on the social issues is just about as bad as any country in the world. So we were blocked for a while, not long. and then we were approved. So we have official badges. We can participate in any UN negotiation, and we're, like I said, we're there pretty much every working day.
Austin Ruse joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe on the Crusade Channel. Austin, is there a monolithic worldview that says that abortion is a fundamental human right? I know it's from your point of view, from your experience. I'm sorry to cut you off. From your experience, or put it like this: from where Joe and I sit when we watch social media and everything else, when we watch the news, what those rare instances that we do anymore, okay, you would think the whole world is pro-abortion, and I want your opinion. You're working in a global organization at the UN. Is that the case? Because it seems to me there's a lot of voices out there that say, well, hold it, not so fast.
Well, abortion has never been recognized as a human right by the UN General Assembly. As a matter of fact, abortion is rarely even mentioned in UN negotiations. And the reason for that is that if there was an up or down vote on abortion as a human right in the General Assembly, it would lose for a whole host of reasons. It's not like the whole world is with us on the life issues. It's that most countries in the world believe that this particular issue ought to be left up to them to decide. So for a lot of countries, it's really a matter of national sovereignty. And we're fine with that. We don't need every country to agree with us in precisely the way that we believe in these particular issues. So there's that. Reproductive health, of course, is mentioned thousands of times in thousands of documents. And that's used as code for abortion, but the abortion itself has never been recognized as a right in UN documents. Now, that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is, what do governments and people believe around the world? And, quite honestly, I don't think that we can possibly know that, because, we just don't poll the world. We do know that the radical feminists and the sexual revolutionaries hold the whip hand in many countries, international institutions like the UN, the European Union, so on and so forth. So they have an outsized voice on this particular issue. If you ask them, they say that there's already an international right to abortion, but that's false. But I would guess that if there was some sort of miraculous poll of the people of the world, they would not agree with the assertion that abortion is a human right.
Thank you for that, Austin Ruse. Because again, we what we are fed, or with what we're fed, sometimes you don't know what to think. All right.
Yeah.
So I'm glad for that. Joe Resinello.
Austin, last month, the UN had a basic conversation about racial discrimination with regard to abortion. And they're somehow like making reference to Dobbs, saying that it's going to affect African Americans. I guess in a bad way. I would say it's a good way. I think they got it twisted. I mean, clearly, this is the largest and greatest example of, they always talk about, discrimination. I mean, African Americans are aborted exponentially more than, say, upper middle class white children across America, particularly in New York City. And I don't know how they twist this. I mean, we all know that Planned Parenthood clinics, the majority of them are in walking distances from minority neighborhoods. How could you possibly say that you're discriminating against African American women when we're basically aborting their children out of existence in some cities and in some neighborhoods?
This was a report of what's known as the Special Rapporteur on racism, and he examined the United States and determined, of course, that we're thoroughgoing racist here in the United States, and that overturning Roe v. Wade through the Dobbs decision was going to have an outsized impact on African American women. And as you say, more babies are aborted in New York City than are born. And this is one of the very odd things about this particular debate, is that people on the sexual left, if you mention this on social media, for instance, about the situation of Black babies in New York City, it's so odd. You're called a racist, because you're questioning the agency of Black women. But the fact of the matter is more babies are aborted in New York City who are African American than are born. So our Black brothers and sisters in the pro-life movement refer to this as the Black genocide. And there's actually a movie with that title that looks at the fact that 12% of the population, and 12% is every single Black person in America. So let's cut that in half and let's say 6%. Let's cut that a little bit more. Black women of childbearing years make up a tremendous percentage of abortions in this country. So there's a very serious problem here. I mean, it's a funny thing. I mean, I tell people when I have engaged in these debates, and they call me racist, I say, how can I be racist? I want there to be more Black babies and not less. Moreover, I tell them, I work very closely with African delegations to stop the sexual revolution coming to Africa, which is, basically a full-time job. So yeah, these special rapporteurs at the United Nations are all left-wing progressive radicals who simply make things up. These special rapporteurs will say that there's an international right to abortion. They'll say that there's an international, that sexual orientation and gender identity is a protected category of non-discrimination in international law. All these things are false. So the special rapporteurs and the human rights apparatus say pretty much whatever they want to. And this is compared over against what the General Assembly says, which is generally quite different. I mean, for instance, I'll tell your viewers and listeners that we actually have a really good definition of gender in international law, which we helped negotiate many years ago when the International Criminal Court was formed. There's something called the Rome Statutes that established the International Criminal Court. And the definition of gender in the Rome Statutes is men and women in the context of society. Now, that's very clear. Even in the Beijing Women's Document, it says that gender is to be understood in the traditional understanding of the word. There's a new effort right now. We've been following it now for many, many months. A new treaty that they hope to negotiate on crimes against humanity, in which they're going to try and change the definition of gender. I think we're going to be able to stop that. But yeah, these special rapporteurs are just left-wing lunatics let loose upon the land.
Tell me about it. Austin Ruse joining us at the front line with Joe and Joe. Let me ask you this. I forgot if it was the president of Nigeria or the president of Kenya recently was in an interview with Christiane Amanpour. Okay. Do you know which interview I'm talking about, Austin, by any chance?
I don't.
Okay. I believe it was Nigeria. Forgive me, audience members, if I have it wrong. But here's what I gleaned from this interview. Because if you want to talk about liberal leftist condescension, dripping with what I believe to be pure racism, was Christiane Amanpour questioning this man on gay marriage. Okay.
Okay.
So and as though basically he was saying to her, we have a lot of poor people in our country. We have economic issues we have to deal with. And what he was really saying between the lines, Austin Ruse, and I love your comments, is kick rocks, Christiane. We're not interested in this. We have a traditional view of our culture. It's religiously based, all right? Mostly Christian, okay? And aside from that, we're not dealing with this. Because that's like almost like that's a you problem. That's a West problem. You guys want to grapple with that. We don't even find it to be in question. Am I wrong in my assessment there? Because I think he's absolutely right. He's like, first of all, we're not dealing with that. Second of all, we have a lot bigger fish to fry. So stop trying to ram your ideology down our throats. And like I said, Austin, I really like your comments, is it felt like it dripped with a condescension, like the CNN liberal is going to tell this African president how he should govern his country.
But they know better, Joe.
And this is
well, they do. They do.
Pope Francis has even called it sexual colonialism. And there's an effort to impose this radical sexual revolution from Europe, the United States, on Africa. And what the Africans tell us that they need is basic medical care, education, clean water, safe sanitation. They need better roads so that they can get their people to hospitals in the larger cities. And these are the things that the UN radicals don't care about. There's a negotiation that just ended last week on food security the negotiation that took place in Rome, and they were pushing the whole LGBT agenda there. And I believe that this was blocked actually by the Holy See and several other countries. So wherever these things come up on things that Africans really need, they try to attach the sexual revolution to it. And so Christiane Amanpour, of course, was trying to bully him on an issue that's important to her, but that's certainly not important to Africans. I mean, not only are they opposed to these things morally, but they really need other things other than our sexual ideology.
Well, thank you for that, because that's exactly what it is. Is like, on the one hand, it's not a pressing concern of theirs, and on the other, their culture is just they're not moving along with this woke ideology that's being imported or imposed, exported, I should say, by the West. Joe Resinello.
Austin, Biden's administration recently proposed a gender policy that would basically, define women out of existence. I mean, I find this to be amazing when I see this. I know Joe Biden in his CNN interview said that there's at least 3 genders, which I find to be the most ridiculous thing a man who claims he's from blue collar Scranton, Pennsylvania would ever say, but we'll leave that for another day. Basically, this particular piece of legislation says that there's 40 variations of sexual characteristics and they don't characterize any of them as either male or female. I mean, I have young children. They know the difference between boys and girls. If you ask an 8-year-old, they'll say that this is a boy and this is a girl. 40 characteristics? I mean, here's another thing. I mean, at the UN, particularly, there are Muslim nations. I can't imagine them going along with this. Like, I to their credit, they stand up for themselves. We should stand up as much, if not more. And we have the true presence of Jesus Christ in our church, and we don't do it justice, if you ask me, when it comes to standing up on issues like this. But 40 variations at the UN, how isn't this just laughed off the podium? I don't even know how people who pretend to be serious could actually even propose something so ludicrous.
This is actually not an issue. Well, I mean, this particular thing you're referencing didn't happen at the UN. It is happening from the Biden administration through USAID and the gender policy of the U.S. Agency for International Development. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars every year through USAID, and they have attached a quote unquote gender policy to it. And the latest iteration of this gender policy, which began under the Obama administration, uses phrases like women in all their diversity. And what this means is that women are defined out of existence, because women in all their diversity, what they mean by that is men in dresses. So what they have done is define women out of the definition of women, because if it can be men in dresses, then it can be anything. So there's a new youth policy attached to the gender policy, which is now being discussed, and it pushes this ideology on aid recipients who are children around the world. So all this is related to the hundreds of millions of dollars that the United States sends to the developing world with strings attached for them to accept all of this gender nonsense, including the fact that basically women don't exist.
So they starve the kids if they don't acknowledge the 40 variations of sexual genders, basically. How nice.
I think Austin's audio cut out for a second. All right, so it's unfortunate. I guess we're gonna have to leave it there, Austin. And we'll have you back. I mean, we'd love for you to come back on the show, Austin Ruse. As always, he's with CFAM. Everybody out there at the on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. She'll look that up. And the great work that Austin's been doing for years in these negotiations and the things that are important to us. and all of you out there in our audience. So, Austin, sorry about the technical problems, but thank you, brother, and thank you for coming on the show. We'll talk to you soon. So, Joe, I mean, look, we've said it before when we've had him on the show. He's in the belly of the beast. Okay. He's dealing with all these wokesters. I wanted to ask him about Giorgia Meloni and the reaction to her in Italy, because you had the Prime Minister of France basically, well, we're gonna monitor events in Italy very closely to see if there's any human rights abuses. My first two reactions to that are, number one, the major human rights abuse is the murder of an unborn child in the womb. There's your first human rights abuse. And second of all, you're in France. Giorgia Meloni's in Italy. Mind your effing business. You have no authority over what the Italian people say or do or who they vote into office. Who are you as the Prime Minister of France to tell them you're going to monitor them? Joe, am I wrong in that? Am I just blowing off steam?
I mean, please. These conversations, sometimes they're just sad. It's just sad. Sometimes I think the Great Reset is going to be a nuclear war. Maybe God's going to wipe us out.
Well,
That's the real great.
Well,
It's
listen,
just sad. I don't
Joe,
even.
I never saw, again, I'm a fairly decent student of history. Okay. I have a fairly decent breadth of knowledge. I'm not as knowledgeable as many others out there, but I know history. Okay. I don't see any other time in human history that's as atrocious as from the time of the French Revolution until now, and having a crescendo right around now. The depths to which human beings could fall, the depravity to which we could fall, while at the same time, the depraved are trying to tell you that you're evil and you're immoral and you're intolerant and you're a racist and you're all these things. These people are so far in the mud, okay? And you could just leave it with abortion, but you could include everything else, what they propose. And at this point in history, Joe, unfortunately, they won't win in the end. We know that, but they're winning the argument. I hope not for long. I hope people wake up. But when you hear about, let's say, for this universal right to abortion and blah, 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 and the Prime Minister of France and Bolsonaro in Brazil's trying to step up, and Giorgia Meloni in Italy and in Poland and in Austria, and people are trying to step up and exert national sovereignty, they're the bad guy, especially if that sovereignty involves anything that's remotely resembles Christianity. You know where I'm going?
I hear it. Like I said, it's just sad. I read the news, and to be honest with you, that's exactly, I talk to myself when I look at the news in the morning. I just say, how sad. It's just sad.
Joe, I got tired of talking to myself, so I stopped watching the news in the morning.
Not a bad thing.
The same thing.
Let's go to Tulsi, man.
Yeah, I mean, we gotta talk about Tulsi Gabbard, okay? And listen, we could bring in also one of the things that she's probably reacting to, okay? But let's play a clip. We have a clip of Tulsi Gabbard, kind of setting the backdrop, and then we'll come back here at the front line with Joe, and we'll talk about it.
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party. It's now under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms enshrined in our Constitution, and who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality.
Well, I mean, Joe, I'm going to just hand it over to you. I mean, look, this woman's definitely got some stones. There's no question about it. Okay. She's going to be vilified. Here's the problem, though. I've heard some people say, well, she left the Democrats. She's becoming a Republican. No, she's not. No, she's not. At least unless I missed the news, she's not becoming a Republican. She's simply leaving the Democrats. Okay. Now, I want to stay on a particular topic, Joe, but you're going to expand on it probably on some other issues. But I grew up in the age in the 80s and 90s of people like Oliver Stone. And I was told by him and the rest of the Hollywood elites and many people in the culture that they're pacifists. Okay, that no, war is never the answer, which we know is not true. And the church would even teach that sometimes war, a just war, or war itself is justified. Having said that, okay, they all said that they're pacifists. We can't go to war. We have to negotiate and everything else. Every single one of them wants us to go to war with Russia. Now, I'm not saying Oliver Stone, I don't know about him for sure, but I'm using him as an example of years and years of watching Hollywood movies, and America, when they go to war, is evil, in Vietnam and here and there and everything, Korea and Iraq. Afghanistan and then Iraq again. And America's evil every time they go to war. And all the people that called us evil, Joe, are forcing us to go to war against Russia. Okay? And that's one of the reasons why she's leaving the Democrat Party, because she sees that they're pushing it. They're pushing us towards war.
Well, I listened to a number of interviews with her. I listened to her with Joe Rogan. I listened to her get basically her leaving get broken down by Tucker. While there's probably some sincerity there, she's making a play for the presidency.
You think
She's
so?
a shrewd person. By the way, Robert George called this 2 years ago. Swear. Kudos.
What did he
to
say?
He basically said she's going to drop the Democratic Party and make a play for the president. He said it 2 years ago.
As what, though? As what? Independent?
Well, that we don't know, but I think she sees an opening. And she's a shrewd person. Keep in mind, she was elected to Congress, I believe, at the age of 21. She was the darling of the Democratic Party, and she basically gave the golden chalice back. I'm not interested. For that, I will give her some credit. With that said, though, I think she sees an opening and she's going to make a play. Where that goes, it remains to be seen. I think she's shrewd. The Democratic Party, to be honest with you, if you ask me, it's a ship sinking. They've pushed the envelope too far, and I think she's identified that.
But then what do we get, Joe? See, here's the thing. If you ask me here at the front line with Joe and Joe on the Crusade channel, if you ask me what direction she's going in, she embraces, let's say, more free market conservatism. She keeps her socially liberal policies in place, and she runs as a libertarian. And let them go and vote for her. They don't want war either. I'm not disparaging libertarians, Joe. Don't get me wrong. They don't want us involved in entanglements and foreign wars and costly wars, both in terms of American lives and American money and equipment and everything else. They don't want to go to war with Russia. They look at this as a European problem. It strikes me, maybe I'm missing something, that she would run as a libertarian. Socially liberal, economically, maybe she'd have to shred some of the Democrat Party in the area of fiscal policy, maybe embrace more free market conservatism. And guess what? Boom, you got your libertarian candidate. Heaven knows they could use her because they haven't had a successful candidate in their whole time in existence, really. That's the only place I can see her because, Joe, I'm going to be honest with you. She runs as a Republican. I'm not voting for her.
Oh,
I
dude,
think she's got stones.
I'm not voting for her either. Absolutely not.
Joe, I think she's got some guts, but at the end of the day, I'm not going into the voting booth. I'm not pulling the lever for Tulsi Gabbard.
No, not at all. She's a politician. I think, like I said, I'll say it again. I think she sees an opening and she's jumping on it. Howard Schultz thought he saw an opening when he was going to run as a third-party candidate. He got cancer and backed away. Right. And frankly, Howard Schultz, when he did run, like when he had his campaign, his exploratory campaign, basically he's a Democrat of old. The Democratic Party has to basically get some smelling salts under its nose. They've lost their mind. To be honest with you, they don't relate to people.
Well, let me ask you a question. Let me cut you right there because Tulsi Gabbard said in that clip that we just played, Joe, she talked about an attack on people of faith. Okay.
Oh, but does she actually care about that and spirituality?
Well, no. I'm not saying whether, and I'm not passing judgment on whether she does or she doesn't, Joe. I'm asking you a question. Okay. But they are attacking people of faith.
No, it's a given.
Again, you may take the more cynical view that she's using that for political gain. Okay. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but maybe she is. All right. She's making a play for higher political office. Or she's sincere and she says, hey, look, I don't agree with these people. I don't know what her faith is, but if she has any, but I don't agree that the Democrat Party should be constantly attacking people of faith. Okay. Either way, she's pointing out a defect in the Democrat Party, which is, the Democrat Party in the 20th century was expanded and grew because of people of faith, particularly Catholics, German, Italian, Irish, in the urban areas that all voted Democrat. They gained in political power because of people of faith. Joe, nowadays, these people, they're totally opposed to anybody talking about faith. So is that one of the things that she's leaving the party for, in your view?
I think that's secondary. I do think that she's definitely anti-war. She's a veteran. She talked about like the military complex, basically generating money. that I think she's spot on about. I think she's spot on about the cabal. I mean, clearly, and I give her kudos for speaking about it. But I do think this is just a political play. I really do. I think it's a calculated political play. She's a smart woman. She's a smart woman. I don't know where she's going to fall, but she's definitely going to make a run for it. And frankly, if you ask me, the Democratic Party should follow her lead. They have to dump this ideology if they think they're going to survive long term. I'll be honest with you, Joe, it's a loser. The best polls are not on the news. Talk to your neighbors. Talk to people who are Democrats. Ask them questions. Joe, they're not for this.
Joe, but it seems, where do they get? Let me ask you a question. You're not going to tell me that even somebody as dense, okay, as Hillary Clinton, or even Elizabeth Warren, and she is absolutely the dullest knife in the drawer. You're not going to tell me they act. I mean, I'm asking Joe. I'm not making a comment. I'm asking you. Do they really believe that these positions are winners? I mean, we talked about that woman down in Virginia. She wants to criminalize parents who don't affirm their children as far as transitioning, from one sex to another. In other words, do they really believe that these are going to eventually be winners with the electorate? That as long as there's enough enculturation and indoctrination coming from Hollywood, coming from the music industry, coming from the universities, do they really think people are eventually going to embrace this stuff? Are they that? I'm being serious. I'm asking
it has
a real
anything
question,
to do
Joe.
with being dense. People live in echo chambers. There are conservatives that do that too.
Joe, I'm only talking about from a political point of view. I'm only talking about from a purely political point of view.
Think about what CNN did. They lived in an echo chamber and it drove their ratings right into the sewer. I mean, Zucker is a Harvard graduate. Now I'm just talking about analytically speaking. He's not a dummy. You don't run CNN by being dumb. Do you know the politics? I'm not talking about as in Republican and Democrat, to worm your way into to become the CEO of CNN. I mean, yet he was deranged. He got Trump derangement syndrome, and basically he ran his station into the sewer. Dude, there are conservatives that live in echo chambers too. Listen to some people, Joe. All they do is listen to their own voice in their head, and they get lost. And that's what I think a lot of these people are doing. It's insanity.
But here's the thing,
and again, just think about talk to normal people. Like, again, they're not in chat rooms, that are not basically in these circles of
Joe,
Twitter.
that leads me to a question. Where do they get their bravado from, the left, when it comes to these issues? Take the one, let's stay on that. The one in Virginia, all right? They want to criminalize parents for raising their children the way they want, okay? Not affirming them, okay? Where do they get their stones from, Joe, to think that they could do this? I mean, an echo chamber is one thing. I've been in an echo chamber. I've admitted that. Okay, I used to be lockstep conservative, never questioned the free market, blah blah blah. I've opened my ears, opened my mind, and listened to more reasoned analysis of these things. But my views on market economics weren't ridiculously crazy either. See, you know what I'm saying? How do they convince themselves of these insane, psychotic ideas, and they think in their minds, "Oh, that's a good idea." That's my question to you. Or that's why I mentioned, are they dense? Are they thick? Do they get it? Are they completely brainwashed? They really think that that's going to go over? Did they see the result of the last Virginia election? That was what this all was in reaction to.
Well, the last Virginia election basically because of that rape. If that rape didn't exist, Youngkin would not be in office.
Well, blame Terry McAuliffe too, the smart guy who said, I don't think parents should be involved with their children's education.
But I don't even think that that's enough, because sadly, people are so slow in reacting to things. Joe, all of this stuff, we called 4 years ago. I'm going to be honest with you. And people, if you don't believe it, listen to the videos. We called all of it. People don't want to believe it, because it goes against their identity, their tribe, and they don't want to believe it. until something horrendous happens. And it happened in Virginia. It was right in their face. And he didn't win by a lot, by the way. So, like, just think about that. People also, a lot of these people live in very comfortable little bubbles. They're very wealthy. They live in, Joe, they're above the fray. All of it. You're worth 50 million bucks. You have a fancy degree. You're smart. You can make money doing anything. You can make money doing anything. They're not like regular people who struggle. And frankly, a lot, and that's why I think they come up with these crazy ideas.
But regular people, for some stupid reason, regular people are imbibing this stuff. I know somebody, Joe. I don't know
about that, Joe. I'll be truthful with you. Like, there are I work with people, some people who do, but some of those people make a lot of money and they live in very cushy, fancy towns.
I'm not talking about them, Joe. I'm talking about regular
people. If you talk to even Democrats, I don't think it's a problem of the issue. It's a problem of political identity. A lot of times you could talk to a Democrat and they'll agree with you on some of these crazy things, but yet they'll still pull the lever because they identify as a Democrat and they can't shake it.
Well, what about when blue collar Tony in Bergen County comes home and 6-year-old Johnny comes in and says, "Daddy, I want to be a girl." But he voted. I mean, so at one point, Joe, do we have to?
People don't connect that dot until that happens. And it doesn't happen. They don't connect it. Like,
how do they not?
Right now, if
the son comes home and says, "My teacher told me I could be a girl," that's all the connection they need. Where am I wrong?
I get it, but that doesn't. Joe, that's also not, in terms of pure numbers, happens a lot. To be truthful with you, you're not dealing with like massive numbers. It's sort of like the abortion straw man with the rape or the incense. That is not a big number. That's happening. That's not going to move the dial. It's a bad conversation. Dare I say, it's evil. But at the same time, it's when it affects people. Like, what Tony might get upset with is the sports thing. His daughter plays softball and a boy is on the softball team and she doesn't start. That might get upset. He might get upset with that. But sadly, I mean, people, it's almost like they can't connect the dots in their head. People do this to me at work. They'll complain about the crime, yet they'll vote for the Democrat again.
Right. Well, did you vote for Eric Adams? That's what I would tell you.
No, that's my point. I tell them that. I said, this is what you voted for.
And did you vote for de Blasio before him?
But people, because of it's an identity. Dude, there are conservatives that are like that. We talked about this in Canada. There are Catholic conservatives that will vote for Danielle Smith, Joe. Danielle Smith is for abortion. So this is my point. Right. Like, we have to drop the titles. There is no title. There is no left and right. It's right and wrong.
But Joe, we're in the face right now. What we face in America, the political reality is that even though you are 1,000% correct at the front line with Joe and Joe on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online, 1,000% correct that we need to dissect issues. The problem is, Joe, there would be too much picking and choosing, because even though currently, I can't find one issue to vote for a Democrat on. Not one. From taxes to immigration to all of the woke nonsense, they, to me, are completely psychotic. They are the party of psychosis. Okay, that's what they've chosen to become. That's where they are. Okay, but on the Republican side, Joe, I have to pick and choose. You have to pick and choose. We don't have a party that's going to completely align with our worldview on these different issues, and we have to make choices. Now, my thing is, more than anything else, is how does a normal blue-collar working person in Bergen County, Essex County, Morris County, in Jersey, in Hudson County, in Union County, how are they possibly voting? All the Hispanics, all the ethnics, okay, how are they possibly voting for these people? Knowing that everything that they stand for. I work with a guy here, Joe, he's an Hispanic guy, great guy, Roman Catholic. He says, yeah, he said to me flat out, I brought it up. I shouldn't bring it up at work, but I like the guy, and I know we'll keep it between us. As I said to him, I said, are you going to vote on November 8th? And he says, he goes, dude, I'm Catholic, and my family's always voted Democrat. He goes, but I just can't do it. I want to see many more of him. He's saying, my family voted Democrat for years, for decades, as Hispanic Americans. He goes, and I can't do it because, and he said straight up, he goes, I can't do it because it just doesn't move. It doesn't align with my faith anymore.
Not
Where
enough
is his
people are
voice out
driven
there?
by faith. That's number one. And number two, I think the issue to bang on is money. You see, what I think the message that people have to get out there to those people is this, and this is what I do. If you are working poor, if you all the way up to the middle class, this party does not represent you financially. It has embraced globalist ideas, which are bringing in foreign workers, which are taking your jobs. You are not being represented financially, and you are getting bulldozed. Now, if you're in the upper middle class to the elite, you can weather this financially. You may not like paying $5 a gallon for gas, but you can. You may not like paying $50 more a week, but you can. The message that conservatives, if I was running for president, that is the first, that's all I'm talking about, every question in every debate. You, sir, are in the middle class and you're paying $6,000 a year in gasoline because of green policies, which purposely increased the price of gas, caused inflation across the board, and you cannot pay your bills. That's your message. Message number two, crime. You are in danger. You are in danger when you go onto the subway. There are your issues. The other stuff, Joe, I'm going to tell you, it doesn't move the dial because sadly people believe what they believe. They're schizophrenic when it comes to politics, and it's like talking to the effing wall. They'll agree with you. They'll say, oh, there are two genders. Who you voting for? Joe Biden. Oh, wait a minute. My daughter shouldn't be competing against a boy in swimming. Who you voting for? Joe Biden.
Joe Biden.
Oh, I'm not for third trimester abortions. That's horrible. Who you voting for? Joe Biden.
Joe Biden.
You talk about this. You can't pay your mortgage. You can't pay for your car.
Right.
You've been eating rice and beans 5 nights out of the 7 days a week.
Ramen noodles.
I like rice and beans, but 5 times a week is kind of tough.
Joe, we
got to change their vote.
Joe, we got to leave it there. Great conversation. Thanking Austin Ruse and Bartholomew Crenshaw for coming on the show. So Austin's at CFAM, so you can look up CFAM and see the work he's doing there in the United Nations. And Bartholomew has the Saving Canada podcast. So we would encourage you all out there to look more into them. And you know, if you like what you see, subscribe. And speaking of subscribing, go on crusadechannel.com, open the hood, kick the tires. Look around, and we know that you're going to love that and want to become a subscriber of the Crusade channel. Joe and I are honored that Mike Church has us on his platform where we go on Monday nights. So we want to thank you all out there. And by the way, wherever you see Joe and I on social media, wherever, where we're on Rumble, we're on other sites, we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, where you can help us out, like, subscribe, share, hit the little bell, do all that fun stuff. And we really appreciate you joining us tonight. And remember, until the next time, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We'll talk to you soon. You have to go. So we want to thank everybody for joining us at the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Risanello on the Crusade channel. And wherever you see Joe and I on social media, please like, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff. Help us out if you can. And remember, until the next time, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We'll talk to you soon.